Okay, thank you, Jim, for the nice introduction. And sorry that I didn't make it to KDD, which I usually attend every year. And thank Jim and the organizer gave me the opportunity to present my work remotely. Okay, so today I'm going to introduce and discuss with you the challenges, opportunities for data miners in the era of generative AI. So first, let's think about how the generative AI has changed data mining. So if you think about the traditional KDD process, which was in Professor Zhao Han's textbook, so we start from a database, and then we do some sort of massage of the data, and then we are ready to consume the data to apply some data mining algorithms, and then we get some patterns, and we do some evaluation, and then we can say that, okay, we have produced knowledge, and many times they are the models that can serve the purpose of prediction and things like that. So a simplified view, so essentially, once we have the data, then we can do some data pre-processing, which involves, like, for example, feature selection. And then we can apply data mining algorithms. It could be very complicated. Could be, for example, graph neural network, could be time series forecasting, and things like that. And after that, we do some post-processing. In many cases, it involve like the evaluation, visualization, explanation. And then after that, we just output our knowledge, again, usually in the format of models. So in this process, we need to have domain experts and data scientists. They work together, especially for the first part and the last part. But then can Gen AI replace some of the roles? So we did something recently led by Shi Chang, who has just graduated and right now a postdoc at Harvard. So our idea is like try to see whether the LLMs has the capability to really understand the task and to help us to do, for example, data integration and feature extraction. And it turns out that they can do very well. Okay, so once we tell the LLM, okay, what kind of task we're interested in, for example, try to predict the solubility of a molecule, and then they can automatically identify the most important concepts. And then once we give them those molecules one by one, just utilize their name and maybe small string, then they can help us to get the labels, meaning the feature values for each feature. And afterwards, it turns out we only need to have the very simple, let's say, linear regression model, and then we can do a very nice prediction. And this process can be repeated multiple times, meaning that you can also try to ask for some new concepts based on the current result. And the prompt could be very simple. You just utilize natural language, and then you just say, okay, how many concepts I want this time, and this time would be the molecule. And if you look at results, it's surprisingly good. Okay. For example, our baseline could be graph neural networks, including GRN, which we know that it's very powerful, and could be the LLM based baselines. But it turns out that definitely number one, if we design the algorithm utilize graph neural network, the performance usually is still better than the simple LLM-based approach. But if we ask the LLM to play the role as concept extractor and feature labeler, and then utilize linear regression, turns out that the result is much, much improved. And also, if you look at the identified concepts, right, so it's very interpretable, then people can understand which features are most important. So from this example, we might raise the question, does that mean that LLM can already replace some of the roles of data scientists, and also the very sophisticated algorithm are no longer needed? Actually, this is also a question for students who take my introduction to data science or introduction to data mining classes. Before we answer this question, right? So let's take a look at first the two benchmark tasks, and then we go to some like real world applications. So the first benchmark that we have done is led by Mandy, and it's new, who actually just won the runner-up dissertation award this year. Okay, and also my collaborator, Professor Wei Wang from UCLA. So for this benchmark, we try to evaluate the capabilities of LLM. So what we are doing is try to collect the college level scientific problems, most likely from the textbooks and also from private exams, try to see how good they are doing. So we are actually collecting a couple of subjects, including physics, chemistry, math, and computer science. But since we are computer scientists, so that's why I'd like to show the results of that. So it turns out that even we utilize the most advanced LLMs, including both zero-shot or chain of thoughts, they are not doing so well. So they are doing worse than average college student who are taking our classes. For example, for the data mining class, the midterm, the LLM is doing 58, and for the final, it's just 32 out of 75, much, much worse than the average college student. So for the first example, we can say that if we ask them to solve some complex tasks, involve some kind of task decomposition and very hard reasoning, then usually it is not ready yet. Okay, so the second benchmark is what we recently have finished, which is called a video physics. Okay, the general goal is try to see whether the current text to video models, they could really preserve the physics common sense. So this is also done by two students from UCLA, and Johnson currently is supervised by myself and Professor Kawai Chang, my colleague. So then the short conclusion is like, if we look at the current text to video models, they're not doing that well yet, okay? So here just the two examples. One is about, okay, can you show a frisbee flying? And the second is like, can you show a soccer ball into the goal? But just visually, right? So we can see that actually the object is not that consistent. And for the second one, we can clearly see that, okay, the soccer ball does not even fall. So it kind of violates the gravity. And if you look at the numbers, definitely it's still a long way to go. Even the closed models like Pika, the best of them just reach lower than 20% of accuracy. So from these two examples, we can see that probably we cannot completely try the existing generative AI models. We need to really enhance them. And there are some other points I'd like to mention. The first thing is like our world is more complicated than just the text and images. There are so many different types of complicated data types. In many cases, we need this capability of handling multimodality. And second of all, we could not really assume that all the knowledge has already been stored and captured in existing data. And unfortunately, the process to get the new labels could be very expensive and time consuming, which we are going to discuss later. And lastly, in many cases, we're not just interested in the forwarding task, for example, the task that would like to predict the properties of a molecule. In many cases, we wish to do the opposite. It's like given a target, okay, and would like to design a molecule or many other things to achieve that kind of target. So with that in mind, let's look at some real-world applications. So for real-world applications, I'm going to mention two. One is in material science, and the other is chip design. So for material science, there are different types of materials. For example, they're like inorganic crystals. So those crystals we we wish that they are stable. So usually it implies that they are with very low energy. So that's why they are stable. And those crystals can be applied to, for example, microchips and some batteries, or like put into the solar panels. Okay. The second type of material is called metallic glasses. So as the name suggests, so it is stronger than steel. Okay, but also it's like shapeable as plastic. So this type of material is very useful in aerospace, in sports, in biomedical devices. And the last type of a material is called a metamaterial. So this one's very interesting. So it's like Lego. Okay, if you know the very basic structure, which is called cells, then we can put them together, and then it can have this very synthetic structure, and then usually they can exhibit lots of properties that are not observed by the natural occurring material. And since it's very flexible, so you can imagine that the application is very diverse. So for the materials design, the general goal is like whether we can discover or generate structures either at the molecular level or at the metamaterial level that have some certain properties. So now I just show some visual examples to illustrate. So for the material science application, probably recently you have heard this genome project developed by Google DeepMind, and their work has been published in Nature of last year. So essentially their goal is to discover inorganic crystals. Okay? And based on their approach, they already detected 2.2 million new crystals. So this is like already several magnitude more than all the crystals that has been discovered in human history. Okay? They took like 1 or 2 years. And then if you look at their pipeline, it involves two major things. The first thing is like, okay, they need to, based on the existing crystals, to propose a couple of new candidates. And then with the new candidates, they utilize graph neural network, which is pre-trained, to predict the energy level of those candidates. So if the energy level is past some threshold, then they will send those candidates into this DFT. I have a slide later to further verify whether it's reasonable or not. So if indeed, based on this more sophisticated kind of simulator, that those candidates are good, then we can put them into this database. And we can keep doing this process. So for the density function theory, the DFT, essentially, you can consider it's almost a pseudo evaluator, pseudo ground truth. It's still a model, but it's based on quantum mechanics. And this model is very powerful. So if you are able to finish the computation, then you could predict lots of material behavior and their properties, including the energy that we're interested in. But the downside of DFT is it's very, very slow. And it's not scalable to lots of different sizes of electrons. So according to their paper, so the routine simulations, you can understand the commercialized simulators can only handle hundreds of atoms and can only simulate hundreds of picoseconds. So what is a picosecond? It's 10 to the negative 12 seconds. So it's just not scalable at all. The second example I want to show is the metamaterial. This is also a work that we're collaborating with our collaborators, UCSB and also PSU. So here an illustration. So this is what metamaterial look like. Essentially for each basic cell, it is a kind of very interesting structure, and all those structures can be pieced together to form a bigger structure. So once we have this bigger structure, then essentially we have the metamaterial, and we would like to understand the behavior. And the behavior here is different from the previous kind of behavior is more like static or just a scalar. And this kind of behavior is a response curve. For example, if you exert some force to this material, then how that will cause the strain of this material. Right? So essentially, it's a curve. And we could have a different curve, for example, transmission frequency curve. Okay, so people wanted to, based on this response curve, to understand the behavior of the metamaterial. And in many cases, people want to draw a curve, like expected response curve, to inversely design this metamaterial. So that's the generation task that we want. And for us, we have already collected 3,000 designs and their response curve via this very high fidelity simulations, which implies that this part is very, very slow. You might consider 3,000 is such a tiny number compared to natural language, right? Yes, but that's what we can do, okay, because it's such an expensive process to collect those labels. So the second example or application I want to share is chip design. Yeah, probably you're like, is that too far from us? Okay, so 5 years ago, I thought the same way, but then I realized that actually, right now, the chip design is not that different from code generation. Okay, so later I'm going to mention that. But the need of chip design is like we have different domains of applications. We need to really design this customized chips. For example, TPU from Google is a good example of this area. Then how can we design those customized chips? Can we just design from scratch to draw this logic gates or directly draw the physical design? It's just impossible. So think about the transistors that we're going to have for each of those chips, right? So we can realize that, okay, no way that a human can design from scratch. But from chip design perspective, fortunately, we have different levels of abstraction. You can go from this level, probably it's difficult for you to understand, then I translate this hardware kind of terminology into more natural language. So on the top, it's more like it's in C or C++, plus some like behavior description of the code. Okay. And after that, you can utilize the so-called high-level synthesis to translate those C or C++ code into hardware code, usually written in Verilog or VHDL. Once we have the hardware code, then we can utilize logic synthesis to generate the logic gates, okay, like AND or XOR, all those gates putting together. And then once we have this logic gates, then we could utilize physical synthesis to kind of map them into the physical layout. Okay, when we have that physical layout, then it's ready for tape out. Then we can really have the chip. So the good news is like now, the chip design problem just becomes kind of writing a software, right? Writing code, and especially assume that we have a existing kernel. The meaning of a kernel here is different from the mathematical kernel or the kernel utilizes the supported vector machine. The kernel here is just a program that is frequently used or like sub piece of program that is frequently utilized. For example, this one is just a matrix vector multiplication. Okay, so this is a code. If we wanted to directly generate a chip for this specific code, then we can utilize the tool that we mentioned earlier. We can utilize a high-level synthesized tool that will directly generate the chip. Human don't have to do anything. Okay, just provide a code. But unfortunately, if we don't add some description of how this code should behave, the generated chip is even slower than the CPU. That's definitely not what we want, because our goal is to customize the chip design such that it can be accelerated. But if we could add some kind of behavior description of the code before each of those loops, for example, here we say probably should do some pipeline. Probably this time you should do parallel position with some factor, okay, then we can significantly accelerate the running speed on the new chip, okay. But then another caveat is like there are so many different ways to insert those descriptions, which we call pragmas. Okay, so where to insert them? So for a simple code as this, we could have more than 3 million design choices. Okay, so then that's very painful. But anyhow, we know that for high-level synthesis, then we can turn a hardware design problem into just a pragma insertion problem. Okay, given a program or kernel X, we'd like to find the best design T, and then would like to evaluate its performance. And this performance could be the latency, could be the kind of memory consumption, and things like that. Okay, we actually provided a HIS benchmark data set, which was published in last year's Europe's. So this is a collaboration with my students and also my collaborator, Jason Kong, who is a top expert in this area. And actually, both Yizhou Sun and Fei, they've now joined NVIDIA because they are researching in this area. And if you look at the number of data points or designs that we have collected, 42,000 from 42 kernels. Okay, each kernel will have 1,000 designs. And for each, we also provided 2 tasks. One is like the regression task, meaning that given the design, can you predict the performance in terms of latency and other numeric values? And a classification task, meaning that whether the design is valid or not, it's kind of whether it's feasible or not. And also we provided 2 versions of tools, meaning that if you use different tools to run your design, actually it will give you different Y. Okay. A small data set, but again, this HLS tool is so expensive, time consuming to run. It takes minutes to hours. So that's why in order to just prepare this 42,000 designs already take years, okay, to collect or accumulate those designs. By the way, also have a contest that right now just launched. Later, I'm going to share that information as well. So then we can see that there are lots of real-world design problems. And what are the traditional approaches? Actually, traditional approaches are very heuristic-driven. Okay, it's just a try and error. So for the try, essentially human will propose some hypothesis, make this design candidates. And after that, then we're going to run either real experiments or some very expensive high-resolution simulators to evaluate the results. So can we do something, make it more automatic? For example, when we say try, okay, can we utilize some optimization to at least get some good design candidates? When we try to really evaluate whether those designs are good or not, can we utilize some algorithm to make the forward prediction very fast to accelerate the evaluation? Okay, and can generative AIs help in these 2 directions? And more specifically, can generative AI help us to do the forward prediction? Can generative AIs to help us to do the inverse design? Okay, with this question in mind, now let's try to do some deep dive into the 2 applications we just mentioned. So I'm going to show some initial solutions and also try to have an open discussion with you about what a Gen AI can do here. So now let's just have a revisit about why a design problem is such a hard problem. Okay, so essentially, for most of the design problem, the search space is extremely large. For example, for the chip design problem, right? Even it's just about insert the pragmas back into the code. But suppose there are like 10 different places that we can insert pragma. And for each place, because we have 3 types of pragmas, and for each pragma, we just assume there are 3 different values. Then we have like 27 for each place. And all putting together is 3 to the power of 30 possible designs. Okay, huge design space. Number 2, the evaluation is very slow. For the chip design case, this HLS tool takes up to from minutes to hours to just evaluating a single design, because kind of a simulation. It has a pipeline to run through. And for the material science example, right? So the DFT, it has to take also a very long time to do the detailed simulation to understand energy and things like that. So putting together, right? So then it might take forever for us to find the best design if we just do like exhaustive search. For example, in this kind of combination, it might take us 2 billion years to find the best design if this design evaluations just take 5 minutes. Okay. So what is the current workflow if we want to automate? Okay. So based on, for example, DeepMind work, based on our work, so usually the current workflow can be decomposed into this forward prediction stage and the inverse design search stage. So in the forward stage, usually like, okay, given the database, we're going to learn forward AI algorithm, okay? And then in the inverse search stage, we're going to utilize some approach. So here it's still very vague, okay? We're going to propose some new designs. And in some cases, just a search or, for example, breadth first search, just to follow a pattern and enumerate all the possibilities. Sometimes in the inorganic crystal generation task, it could like modify the design from the existing ones. Okay? And this is definitely a huge space for us. But anyway, once we have the design, we utilize the surrogate, the trained kind of forward prediction models to accelerate the evaluation. But of course, it's just a pseudo evaluation, right? So then we pick top K from this pseudo evaluation, and then we're going to run the real evaluation, which could be the higher resolution simulators. Could be really you get your material and then make it out, and then we can do the experiment and then get all those numbers. Okay, so once we have done the real evaluation, then we can put our XY pairs back to this database. Okay, so then we really need to have a loop, meaning that this data, this database is not going to be just offline. Okay, it is keep updating. Okay, that implies that we probably also need to keep updating our forward model, and also here, right? So we know that how we can propose a design. That's also kind of a bottleneck. So then, what are the open research questions here? So it means like, okay, in the forward stage, how we can generate those models. So this is also related to the reward model that we're talking in this reinforcement learning human feedback type of generative AIs. The second part is like how we can utilize the reward model to guide the design generation. Right? So this is again related to the alignment type of topic. And now let's just try to introduce some existing work, and then hopefully that can give us insights to design this more powerful generative AIs. So for the forward stage, so essentially this part is already heavily investigated, and both traditional generative AI models have been proposed recently. So for example, for the SimGNN, which we proposed to try to predict the energy barriers for the metallic glass, which is the second material that we have mentioned earlier. And in this task, we just utilize a specially designed GNN, okay? And then it can preserve the E3 invariance in expectation. And the most important thing is like it can reduce the prediction time from 41 days to less than 1 second, so that it can give us the possibility to kind of enumerate many possible designs and try to understand whether it's reasonable or not. And for this second work, it's called CALE. Okay, so essentially this work is try to utilize graph neural network combined with neural ODE, so then we can really mimic the physical system simulation. And this is just a short video about our simulation. So from this simulation, right, you can see that it's just like a video generation. But the problem is like if we just utilize diffusion model to generate those videos, then we know that it will violate many of this physical common sense. So if they can violate physical common sense, then how can we trust them and believe them that they can naturally preserve the most sophisticated physics? Okay. And our approach can also be generalizable to all kinds of environmental change, meaning the physical system now has a different temperature, has a different Reynolds coefficient, which is the kind of coefficient in fluid dynamics to decide whether you have a very fierce turbulence or relatively it's kind of stable. Okay, and also we have in the chip design, we have the so-called GNDSE, which we transform the code into a graph representation, which can then capture the kind of long-range dependency. Okay, and with that, we can utilize GNN to predict the performance. And after that, in the DSE, the design space exploration stage, then we can just, based on the proposed design, and then we can just quickly calculate whether this design is feasible, whether design is promising, with a much faster speed. So in our current implementation, essentially for every second, we can predict about 200 designs. So remember previously, one design requires a couple of minutes to up to hours, right? So it's a big acceleration. And recently, we also try to explore whether we could utilize transformer-based model to leverage the pre-trained knowledge from them. Because again, for our kind of design, essentially it's like sequential code, right? Plus some like pragma. So that's why can we leverage the kind of knowledge from both modality, the source code modality and the graph modality to jointly do the prediction. And turns out that indeed, if we can do both, okay, the performance can be further improved. Okay, so that's a quick summarization of how we can do in the forward prediction stage. But of course, we know that for the generative AI now, it's so powerful, definitely can make this forward stage even more convenient for us. For example, recently there's some utilize AI models to directly do the time series forecasting. I believe that Professor Yan Liu actually has also mentioned some of those applications. Okay. And then how about the second step? Can we utilize AI for optimization? Actually, for this area, it just started. Okay. But then we already see lots of interesting explorations. So first of all, for the metamaterial design, actually, we have already kind of finished the project and it's under submission. So in this case, we utilize, again, graph as the backbone to, and also design a graph neural network to directly predict the response curve. Okay, so this is quite different from many of the other tasks, which is like giving an input design. You propose or predict a scalar. So here you really need to predict a curve. Okay, and for the design stage, so we utilize reinforcement learning. Okay, we try to see what will be the best action. The action here is like what kind of nodes that you can further add, what kind of edges you can further add, such that you're going to have a big accumulative reward. So the reward here is just a function to of the difference between the predicted curve and the target curve. Okay, so we can calculate the difference between them, and we can turn this difference into a reward function. Okay, and in practice, once we really detect those meta materials, so we utilize 3D printing to really print that, and then try to really exert the external force, and then we can get the real response curve. Okay, so this is kind of how we can really do the testing. We really to print out and do the real world evaluation. Okay, and how about the HLS task? So we are still exploring for this direction. We believe that this Gen AI technique can help us. But before that, we actually have this paper, SECAD, which is the top conference in the hardware design area. So we'd like to say that how we can sample those design candidates actually is art. Okay, this is actually if you think about a diffusion model or even LLM, right? So we'd like to really kind of define the probability of each design or generation, and we'd like to just based on the probability to sample the one with high probability. So here the same thing. So what we try to do is like once we have the estimated reward function, again the reward function is related to the forward stage. Okay, so then we can adjust our design sampler, and once we have a new design sampler, or if the probability to sample different candidates has been changed, then here our reward function, our function to train our reward function actually is kind of weighted loss, right? So each design have a different weight here. So based on the different weight here, actually we can go further to update our reward function. Okay, so these two steps actually can help each other. So also people in the hardware community, they really want to see how the generative AI can help. So for example, very recently, there's an IM for hardware design context. So this context actually they are from the second abstract level. They directly want to see how they can finally generate the Verilog, which is hardware code. And we also have a context called ML for chip design context with high-level synthesis. So this is like just from the top level, meaning that you don't have to handle the hardware code. You can directly handle the C or C++ code. So our context, it just launched. So please join us. Please scan the QR code. It has two objectives, which is corresponding to the two tasks that I mentioned earlier. One is like how you can make the prediction faster and more accurate. And for the second stage, actually, it's like how can you directly generate the design, which means how you can directly generate design with those nice prognosis. So putting together, so this is my vision to the future. Okay, so essentially, our system, right? So we still have the database. We still try to learn some good model or pattern, which could be our reward model from this database. But then after that, this reward model should be able to guide us to do the generation, to propose the new designs, okay, which we call sampler. And once we have the sampled good or with a high probability good designs, so we need to pass them to this domain-specific simulators, or even we run the real experiment to collect the labels for them. And once we do that, we can accumulate all those new designs into our database. So you see, so the entire system is an evolving system, right? So we do not really do this offline training, online deployment. The entire thing has to be evolved all the time. Okay, so to summarize a couple of takeaway messages, real-world design problems are very complicated. That's where we really want to generate them automatically. And usually it has two main stages. One is a forward stage or simulation stage. The other is inverse design, which is optimization stage. And putting together, it has lots of space for us to work, okay? And definitely it can be considered as a new Gen AI paradigm that we can develop. So in the end, I want to promote our HRS contest. So if you're interested, okay, please join us and you can win the prize and also win a trip to Europe this year, okay? And also I'd like to thank my main collaborators and also my student collaborators with pictures already listed before. And also I'd like to thank all my funding agencies to support me to do this very amazing and interesting research. So with that, I'm going to stop here. Okay, so I'm not sure whether there are any questions. I'm happy to answer.